Or what's your most hated enemy in the lands between? You! But why? You killed me. Okay, but surely there were other things that annoyed you more than me. You know what annoys me? What? Death. Look, if you're just gonna whine about it the whole time, then why did you bother coming back? To annoy you. Well, you've just gone up my list. Ladies, gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, today is a special time. On this channel, we talk about a lot of statistical answers to questions, or sometimes even our own personal opinions about things. But sometimes neither of those quite covers a topic correctly. And one of my favorite things to do is reach out to a community itself to see what you all think on a specific topic. Recently, we asked you all a simple question. What enemy do you hate the most in Elden Ring? We kept it open to bosses that appear multiple times throughout the game, but even with that, we only wound up with non-boss creatures for the most part, which I think is a testament to how good From Software is at making random enemies extremely memorable, because they piss you off.
Is that not a good thing?
So having tallied the results today, I'm here to tell you all your own 10 most hated enemies in all of Elden Ring. Starting off with number 10. Ancestral Follower Archers, with 5.6% of the votes. These fine fellows, found far beneath the lands between and Siofra River, have caused quite a stir, and that makes sense as their arrows are accurate enough they could probably aim it to hit a drink from a mile away and give it a stir too without breaking the glass it's in. They are insanely good at what they do, and the second they turn against you, you will regret ever having stepped down into Siofra River in the first place. There's nothing crazy mechanically about them, they just have a bow, fire one arrow at a time, and when they shoot, it will hit you if you aren't just behind a wall. And not only that, but this area can be reached extremely early in the game considering that point and then their accuracy as well. The damage that each shot does is absolutely silly too. Number 9. Blister Giant Crow, with 6.3% of the votes. These are the specific crow that lives in the Mogwin Palace area. Most people will probably recognize it as the ranged rune farm enemy, as you can snipe it from the Site of Grace up the hill on repeat to make it run off the edge for a never-ending source of ruins. If you actually head down to where it is and fight it, however, you'll realize just how painful this type of enemy is, and why it is worth the good chunk of runes that you get when you kill it. It has a lot of similarities to the other giant murder crows that you can find in places like Caelid or the mountaintop of the Giants, but these specific ones have a number of extra attacks that are quite good at catching you off guard, along with extremely high base stats compared to their average. As a result, this one is simply pain to deal with, and I can understand where you're all coming from voting it into here. Number 8.
Do you have the magic arrows?
Albinaric Archer, with 6.5% of the votes. These are the guys found all over Ordina, the liturgical town in the consecrated snowfields. They cannot move without assistance from wolves, but arguably they don't really need to, as from whatever perch they have wound up at, they can fire off volleys of 3 magical arrows that, like the previous archers, feel like they are basically homing missiles, each and every one of them, because now there is 3 of them, and they deal way more damage too. So, you know, it only gets more fun from here, especially of course, once one of these enemies gets on a dire wolf, you know you're in for a rough time. Dealing with their spam is hard enough when they are rooted to one spot until you kill them. It's about 10 times more frustrating though when they are firing those massive volleys of arrows from the back of the creature that is faster than yourself, so you can't even kill them easily. Number 7.
A very large spider on your hand.
Finger Creeper, with 6.9% of the votes. Nice. I honestly had no idea what the real name was for these enemies before, but this fucking Finger Creeper is amazing, and it's an incredibly fitting name. These big old hand spider hybrids are one of the creepiest enemies in the game, if nothing else. They have no discernible features aside from being a big hand with way too many fingers, and the particularly large ones also have a ring on their middle finger. Yeah, I guess it's still in the middle, why not? That ring can fire out laser beams, because it of course wasn't aggravating enough already to have a giant hand come running at you like you're in Looney Tunes, only to bash your face in harder than a rubber hammer could ever dream of. The one reprieve from this menacing foe is that they are ridiculously weak to fire. Any source of fire damage applied to them will just lock them upside down for a few seconds. Even if you aren't in a fire build, you can put literally a torch in your offhand, smack them once with it, and then kill them with your main weapon during this period. So at least one of these is easily dealt with if you know the tactic. Number 6.
Dog.
Dogs, with 8% of the votes. And no, I don't mean those dogs. What a classic entry, though. I mean, if you pose this same question for every From Software game ever made, I bet you some variation of dog would be on the list every single time. To me, in Elden Ring, the most egregious example of this is the bleed-inflicting dogs. The main thing that makes dog enemies in the game difficult as all hell is that they are absolutely relentless, faster than the player normally, and when they reach you, their actual attack speed is also extremely fast. And on top of that, the dogs that apply bleed with every hit, and you essentially have a dog that worked out how to make a seppuku build. It is terrifying in every single way, and honestly, I am way more scared of these bleed dogs than any player with a bleed build, so this entry is absolutely justified. Number 5. Fanged Imps with 8.2% of the votes. These little buggers are mostly confined to the catacomb dungeons all over the maps, which is great because then you can at least expect when they're about to show up and prepare to counter them, because, well, the thing is most players will need to adjust a bit to counter them. They have massive resistances to slashing damage, piercing damage, fire, lightning, and holy damage, reasonably high resistance to magic damage as well, and also immunity to every single status, meaning the only thing that will deal damage to them effectively and normally will be striking melee weapons. On top of that, they are tiny, and their hitbox is equally small, making it hard to just hit them in general, especially when you have to deal with how agile they are, jumping around the place and purposefully dodging your attacks. Their weapons also all apply bleed, and, well, bleed is just sort of the strongest thing in the game, whether it is used by the player or against the player. Number 4.
I'm a bird, I'm a bird, I'm a bird with a sword.
Warhawks with 9.8% of the votes. For an enemy that is completely locked to an early game area in Stormveil Castle, these definitely left quite the impression on everyone who voted here, and I totally get it. At first it is a moment of, whoa, those birds have swords for legs, that is awesome! And then they start chasing you down from out of melee range doing hit and run attacks, and it feels significantly less awesome to be on the receiving end of. Not to mention when you get deep enough into Stormveil Castle to find the Warhawks that throw fucking explosive barrels at you, because why wouldn't they, I guess? Why would it be enough for a bird to have swords for like, no, that's not inventive enough. It should also be able to basically create bombs that are used as grenades. I would love to be at the pitch meeting for this enemy. I can just imagine the faces of the other developers as one of them suggests this bird with grafted sword legs that it uses to stab into explosive barrels and throw them at the player, because it is simultaneously one of the weirdest and most brilliant concepts ever, honestly, that happens to result in an incredibly frustrating enemy to deal with within the game itself. Number 3.
Fire a Crucible in which the only true heroes are forged.
Crucible Knights with 11.1% of the votes. And here as we get into the top 3, we find an enemy that I personally thought had a decent chance of winning overall, just from the community's general conversation about them if nothing else, as they are often referred to as extremely difficult enemies. And you can find them extremely early in the game too, when you're absolutely underprepared to deal with this kind of enemy as well. Between the tail swipes, the shoulder horn, and ground stomp, and most importantly the part around half health where they get wings and charge at you from the air trying to impale you, and of course you just have to fight harder and harder variations of this enemy as you progress through the game as a whole. On top of this, they have really strong resistances to pretty much every damage type, and they are immune to bleed, which just makes one of the most popular build types significantly weaker against them just as a baseline. They are undeniably hard to dodge with their general attacks, and undeniably hard to kill as well. So your thoughts on them? Quite reasonable. However, at the time of closing the polls, they had literally one less vote than number 2. Rune Bears with 11.2% of the votes. And this one surprised me a bit, not for the fact that it was on the list, as the Rune Bears are an absolute pain to deal with, absolutely massive tanky balls of HP relentlessly charging at you as fast as your horse can run, and also dealing a ridiculous amount of damage when they hit you too. You know what? Actually, yeah, it's definitely earned this spot. As well, they're all over the game, mostly in the wild in places that you won't expect to see them, and at least 2 of the Rune Bears actually come as a literal surprise, spawning out of smoke when you kill a smaller enemy. One in Limgrave, and the bigger, much scarier one being in the consecrated snowfields, and that is quite genuinely tough. All in all, it is easy to see where the general distaste for this enemy type comes from, even though personally I love bears as an animal, and I refuse to talk smack about such a lovely, cuddly death machine. Number 1. Revenants with 25.9% of the votes. Yeah, you heard that number right. Revenants, which are the enemies with a billion hands, got almost 2.5 times the number of votes of the entry in second place, and over a quarter of the votes overall out of just everything. This one was head and shoulders above the rest of them. You guys don't just hate the concept of this thing. This is like to the point where I'd be afraid to leave you in a room together because I might come back to find him missing a few of his hands, and that's just not cool to do to someone. These enemies have ridiculously long and fast combos with said hands, making them hard to fight just in general, but that is before even mentioning the fact that they can, frickin' teleport for some reason, because why not? Or the fact that they can spit poison at you to slowly tick away at your health while you're panic dodging their regular attack combo, because every time you see one of these, boss music starts playing in your head, even though they aren't a boss, or at least most of them aren't. And as that was simply a breakdown of the votes on the top 10 as a whole, here is the full list of the full 17 that were available for voting, decided by suggestions from you all in the first place. The voting for this one was a pretty great turnout for our first community vote for Elden Ring, but more votes generally just means a larger sample size and thus a more accurate view of the community as a whole. So if you enjoyed this video and didn't vote on it, keep an eye out on our channel for the next community vote, take part in it, and even share it with your friends if you think they'd be interested. Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.